sure you've heard already that there are several numbers floating around, not just Rick's. There are several numbers floating around in regards to what the Deontay Wilder versus Luis Ortiz rematch did. And the numbers put the buy rate anywhere from 138,000, like Rick said, to 225,000, like Dan Raphael said via ESPN, to 275,000, like Jake Donovan said on Boxing Scene. But no matter what set of numbers you go with,
regardless,
it's crystal clear that this thing flopped. Doesn't matter whose numbers you use, whether it's as bad as Rick says, or it's in the middle like Dan says, or it's as generous as what Jake is saying. One way or another,
it flopped.
This fight flopped. And that much is obvious. I mean, it doesn't matter which way I look. It lived up to what were my expectations. What expectations did I have? Let me remind you. So, you ask me, do I think that this fight will do that? You ask me what I think the fight will do, and I put the number for Wilder versus Ortiz 2 somewhere just under 300,000 pay-per-view buys. That's where I put the number. I don't think this fight is going to do 325,000 pay-per-view buys. Quite honestly, I think they'd be lucky to do 300,000. And that video is from October 31st, a few weeks leading up to the fight. Doesn't matter which set of numbers I go with, from the lowest to the highest, even the most generous estimates confirm what I already thought. That these guys would be damn lucky if they could hit 300,000, because the reality of it is, there was no demand for that fight, and Deontay Wilder by himself is not a draw. He cannot drum up business. He's barely a marquee fighter, and he's clearly not the face of boxing. Not the face of boxing, as some people out there, like Boxing Ego, would have you believe. Because if Deontay Wilder has, in fact, unseated Canelo Alvarez as the face of boxing, if this is true, then why did Canelo Alvarez do more at the gate against Kovalev than Wilder did with Luis Ortiz? Canelo Alvarez brought in double what Deontay Wilder just did with Luis Ortiz. Canelo Alvarez brought in just over $8 million with his last fight against Sergey Kovalev, whereas Wilder only brought in half that. A little over $4 million with this rerun. These are the facts. These aren't my opinions. These aren't my anecdotes. These are the gate receipts. So if Wilder's the face of boxing, then why is Canelo Alvarez bringing in more money than he is at the live gate? And why is Canelo Alvarez earning more, fight by fight, than Deontay Wilder?
Why?
If Deontay Wilder is in fact the face of boxing. Well, this confirms what me and you already knew. That Wilder's not the face of boxing, far from it. What Wilder is the face of is the Fire Stick Committee, the Crayon Crew, the guys out there in the boxing community that don't have anything in their name, aside from a Facebook account, maybe a Twitter handle, an Instagram, but the paying public. No, Wilder's not the face of boxing with them, and we all know that. The paying public, the people out there that pull out their wallets to pay to see boxing, whether it's from the comfort of their own homes or actually being in attendance for a fight with the paying public, Deontay Wilder's not the face of boxing. He's not the face of anything.
Sorry.
The MGM Grand Arena in Las Vegas seats anywhere from 16 to 17,000 capacity. Not that it matters when Wilder's fight, because he only actually sold 7,000 tickets. 7,000! The rest of the people that were in attendance, they didn't pay to be there. They count those tickets in the thousands. Emails went out to the veterans to attend the fight for free. Okay? So I reiterate, Deontay Wilder's not a draw. And no matter what set of numbers I use, whether they're Rick's numbers or Dan's numbers or Jake's numbers, doesn't matter. It all confirms what I already thought, what I already knew. And for those Deontay Wilder fans out there who are looking for something to argue about, well, your argument is really just relegated to how big of a flop it was. It's not a question of whether or not it was a flop. It most certainly was, regardless of which set of numbers you use. And the only thing in question now is, how big of a flop was it? Was it as big a flop as Rick's got it? Was it as big a flop as Dan's got it? Or was it as big a flop as Jake Donovan's got it? Either way, it flopped. That much is obvious. And the reason that I call it a flop, the reason that I characterize it as such, is because several months ago, Deontay Wilder was given some kind of a care package, some kind of financial compensation to ensure that he would reject DAZN's offer. And whoever gave him that money, they're not going to see a return on it. They didn't see a return on it for the Brazil fight because that wasn't a pay-per-view, and they certainly couldn't have seen a return on it for this fight because this fight did anywhere between, 138,000 to 275,000 pay-per-view buys, for Christ's sake?
Mediocre!
250,000 pay-per-view buys was the break-even point for the Fury fight. And all Wilder was guaranteed for that fight was $4 million, where somebody so decided months ago to give Deontay Wilder monies in excess of that. And whoever it was, well, they're not going to see a return on it, not unless the Fury fight does astronomical numbers. Emphasis on astronomical. What, 2, 3, 4 million? It would have to do that many pay-per-view buys for somebody to see a return on the money that is being poured down into the drain to try and make Wilder star. That's what makes it a flop. That this guy is not making you money, he's costing you money. Showtime executive Stefan Espinosa already admitted to Keith Idec that they gave Wilder some kind of something. Not $20 million, but some kind of something. And they're not going to see a return on that because that Brazil fight wasn't a pay-per-view, so you couldn't have got your money back that way. And now, Wilder's on Fox, so you're really not going to see a return. If by some chance the people over there at Fox gave Wilder some kind of additional monies, if they did.
They didn't.
I don't think they did because Dan Rafael made it clear what monies he was talking about, what dollar amounts he was referring to, and where they came from. He was talking about what Showtime gave Wilder, but better still, even if Fox, by some chance, though I doubt it, even if they gave Wilder additional monies, guess what? They wouldn't have seen a return on it from this fight, no sir.
Do the math.
Well, a lot of guys out there leading up to this fight that wanted to believe that Deontay Wilder stood to make $20 million and Luis Ortiz stood to make $7 million. That's basically saying that they were anticipating that $27 million was going to go to the fighters. That's what they were anticipating. That's what they wanted to believe. But if they want to believe that, then they then have to believe that this thing really flopped, majorly flopped, because if $27 million are going to just the fighters' purses, if these are guaranteed dollar amounts that are just going to the fighters, then surely you have to resolve the discrepancy between the pay-per-view buys and the live game. If $27 million is going to Wilder and Ortiz, where's it going to come from when the event only generated $24 million? If $27 million is supposed to be going to just the fighters, how's that going to happen when the event itself only generated $24 million, both at the gate and with the pay-per-view buys? Off pay-per-view, if I use the most generous estimates, if I go with that 275,000 number reported by Jake Donovan, okay, that's basically saying it brought in $20 million off the pay-per-view buys and an additional $4 million at the gate, $24 million. But you guys think that $27 million being guaranteed to the fighters. Okay, well, where's that money supposed to come from? And what portion of the proceeds is going to the break-even point? Because for every single pay-per-view that gets staged, there's a break-even point. The point that covers the cost it takes to stage the event in the first place. I mean, what fairy tale monies do you think are going to all these different expenses, you know? That's if you actually believe that Wilder was going to get $20 million for this thing, you know? To sum it all up, there's no new ground to cover here. This confirms what I've been telling you all along. But this pay-per-view, this thing ain't doing what they did with the Fury fight, and they'd be lucky to even come close to treat 300,000 pay-per-view buys. Yeah, right. Okay? This confirms what I've been telling you all along. Wilder's not a draw. This guy's no marquee fighter. He's not the face of boxing. He's not the face of anything. He's just the face of mouthy idiots on social media that don't know how to do anything else but argue and not buy pay-per-views. That's what he's the face of. And that there's no real argument to be had here unless you want to argue about how big a flop it was, because that's the only thing left to do. Was it as big a flop as Rick says it was, or is it as big a flop as Dan says it was, or Jake? Pick your poison. But either way, it's pretty clear based on these numbers that these people are losing money, and they're losing it on Deontay Wilder. Moving on. In other news, Michael Benson tweeted, Terrence Crawford versus Sean Porter is a fight that Bob Arum has claimed he'd be interested in making in 2020. Kenny Porter, Sean's father, trainer, and manager, said they definitely listened to any approach and invited Arum to contact him. Now, this is a very intriguing proposition because post-fight, after the Errol Spence fight, there was some demand to see Terrence Crawford square off against the likes of a Sean Porter because everybody knows nobody has an easy night with the likes of a Sean Porter. Doesn't matter if it's Danny Garcia, Keith Thurman, or Errol Spence. Sean Porter is a handful for just about anybody and everybody at welterweight. That is the perception, the air that Sean Porter carries about him. Thus, there is intrigue, growing interest to see how Terrence Crawford would fare against the likes of a Sean Porter. And in truth, it's a fight that I want. It's a fight that I would gladly pay for on pay-per-view, okay? I think that any time that Sean Porter is in the ring, get ready for fireworks. And he can provide the kind of resistance, the kinds of difficulties that Terence Crawford hasn't quite faced as of yet. In terms of fight mechanics, I've actually already discussed this fight in a previous video, and I'll leave the link to that video in the description box. But what I want to discuss here is why Shawn Porter should be highly receptive to whatever Top Rank has to offer. Understand that Errol Spence is the unified champion, right? And there's not much chance of seeing him give Shawn a rematch anytime in the near future, because we simply don't know what the state of that man actually is. There are rumors, reports swirling, that we won't see this guy back in action until next summer. Yeah, it could take him that long to return to the ring. So what does Shawn do in the in-between time? Rematch with Danny Garcia? Not likely. I mean, Danny's name is in the hat for a Pacquiao fight.
So why fight Shawn again?
What, rematch with Keith Thurman?
How the fuck would he do that?
For what exactly? There's no belt on the line, so what are you gonna win out of fighting that guy again? We know that Shawn, like many others, wants a Manny Pacquiao fight.
Take a number.
And it's a possibility, though not a very high probability, okay? You know, Manny's looking at anybody from Mikey to Danny, and those are
more likely,
more realistic options than the likes of a Shawn Porter. Use your head. What does an aging 40-year-old Manny Pacquiao have to gain from taking a chance with Shawn Porter?
Nothing.
I mean, I think Shawn Porter is an entertaining fighter. I think he's a bit underrated. But you see what happened. Errol Spence drew in more pay-per-view buys fighting Mikey Garcia, who had no business at 147, than he did with Shawn Porter. So Manny can't be looking at Shawn as some kind of a financial incentive. He's clearly not. Not for a 40-year-old Manny Pacquiao, you understand? I don't think Shawn's very likely to get that fight. Shawn's already been there and done that with Yordenis Ugas, another guy on the same side of the street as him. What, they're gonna fight again for no fucking belt at all?
Pointless rematch.
I mean, one of the only guys at 147 pounds that the PBC's got in this stable is Sergey Lipinets. I dare say that a Porter versus Lipinets fight would actually be an entertaining fight if it were to come off, because they're both aggressive punchers. But who would prioritize fighting Sergey Lipinets over potentially challenging Terence Crawford for his belt, for what he's got? He's a world champion, whether you guys like it or not. That's what he is. And the only chance that Porter has to fight for a world title anytime in the near future rests with Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford, who I've no doubts has to be receptive to that fight at this point. It's not his fault that all they could muster up for him on the Top Rank side of things was Egidijus Kavaliauskas. I mean, that is his mandatory challenger at the end of the day. So there is an obligation there to fulfill, but in the realm of having a buzz for the fight, something that's getting the fans excited, it's sad to say that the fans aren't excited about that fight, even though Kavaliauskas is a top 10 fighter. Now, a Shawn Porter fight would get Crawford the kind of excitement that he's been missing, you know? So they've got to be receptive to it. There is a scarcity of opponents on the Top Rank side of things for Terence Crawford, at least right now. Shawn Porter could fill that void. Kenny Porter seems receptive to it, and so does Bob. Sit down, make it happen, because Terence needs a quality opponent, and Shawn Porter, I've no doubts, wants to be involved in another major fight, another major event, in contention for a world title. And the PBC can't give you that. Not right now. You just lost to Errol Spence in a title fight. The only other title on that side of the street left for you to fight for is Manny's title. But Manny's not likely to pick you. So what are you going to do? You're going to sit on your hands? Keep busy fights? What? Who are you going to fight? You already fought Keith. You already fought Danny. You already fought Ugas. You already fought Spence. There's not a lot left on that side for you to do. But fighting Terence Crawford, taking up that challenge, win or lose, would lend itself to Shawn Porter's credibility amongst the boxing fans, because most boxing fans agree that the PBC stable of fighters are doing everything they can to avoid Terence Crawford. Shawn Porter could be the one to step up, could be the one that proves them wrong, that where Thurman don't want it, and Spence don't want it, and Danny don't want it, Shawn is about the action. Now this is the part where things get hairy. This is the part where things tend to get contentious, because I think that this fight hinges on whether or not Kenny and Shawn can be realistic about things. Oh, I view it as an opportunity for Terence Crawford to fight a quality guy, a more quality guy than most of the guys he's fought since moving up to 147, right? So it's an opportunity for Crawford in some ways, but more so for Porter, more so for Shawn and Kenny. Yeah, it's more of an opportunity for them, because What are the odds that they were going to be in another pay-per-view after losing to Errol Spence? What were they going to bill as a pay-per-view?
What?
Think about it. The only fight that could be billed as a pay-per-view that would actually have some success would be a Pacquiao fight, but we covered that already. You're not likely to get that fight. Before Sean and Kenny lies a world title opportunity that they don't necessarily deserve, but is being afforded to them. A pay-per-view opportunity on the heels of yet another pay-per-view. You know, it's just that in that pay-per-view you lost. Here, you might end up on another one if you play your cards right. Title shot that maybe you don't deserve, but they're willing to give it to you anyway on the heels of what you've done so far. I think this fight hinges on whether or not Kenny and Sean can be realistic. You're not a world champion, you're coming off a loss, and yes, you've been on a pay-per-view, but, you really weren't the selling point. So, there's that. I dare say that a Terrence Crawford versus Sean Porter pay-per-view could do better numbers than the Errol Spence-Sean Porter pay-per-view did. Yeah, why? Because of the rivalry. It's more than just the two men in the ring, you understand. It is the promotional banners. Sean Porter is viewed as one of the PBC's best fighters at 147 pounds. And Terrence Crawford is viewed as pound-for-pound elite. Top 5 guy, top 3 guy, top 2 to some, This is what's on the line. Not just, Terrence Crawford's world title, but the reputations of the banners themselves and the quality of their fighters, the quality of their product. What statement does it send out to the rest of the welterweights out there if Terrence Crawford, hypothetically, were the first to stop Sean Porter? That'd be a hell of a message, wouldn't it? Put the shoe on the other foot. What if Sean makes Crawford look bad? What if he makes him look worse than anyone has been able to in any of his other fights? These are the things that are on the line, and this is the intrigue, this is the sizzle that I think would push this fight to do better numbers on an ESPN pay-per-view than what Sean's numbers were with Errol. Yeah, this is the intrigue. This is the selling point. You want to see Terrence Crawford lock horns with PBC's stable of welterweights. There is a demand for this. So I think the fight would do well on pay-per-view. I don't know about 500,000 or 400,000, but I think it could do somewhere in the realm of 325 to 350. I think it could do that with the right promotion. So the most I can say is, the ball really is in Sean and Kenny's court to make this thing happen.